The leader of the Palestinian group Hamas calls for an uprising after President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Tear gas and water cannons are used as violence breaks out in the Palestinian West Bank. We'll be asking what further fallout there's likely to be from President Trump's controversial announcement. Also this lunchtime, missed targets in A&E. The number of people waiting more than 4 hours in the UK has more than doubled since 2013. A final report into a tram crash in Croydon in southeast London, which killed 7 passengers, has concluded the driver probably fell asleep. Under fire, a university is criticised for giving its outgoing Vice-Chancellor more than £800,000 in pay and benefits. It cost £3 billion to build and weighs 65,000 tonnes. The Queen welcomes HMS Queen Elizabeth into the fleet. And pizza goes posh. The Neapolitan pizza gains World Heritage status.
In the south, close encounter, but what's the plan to stop so many lorries getting stuck in this Dorset village? And Save to the Future, Reading's mural celebrating black culture wins protected status.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. The leader of Hamas, the Palestinian Islamist group, has called for an uprising or intifada in response to President Trump's decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip are holding a day of strikes and protests, and Israel's military has used water cannon against protesters in Bethlehem. Traditional allies of the United States, including Saudi Arabia and France, have condemned President Trump's decision, but Israel has hailed it as historic. Tom Burridge reports.
Tension again simmering here in the Israeli-occupied bank. Israeli soldiers confronting pockets of Palestinians, protesting after a landmark shift in US policy. In Jerusalem's Old City, where security is always tight, shops shut in the Muslim quarter reflect anger. But for many Israeli Jews, their key ally, recognising this as their capital, long overdue.
Historic, definitely historic. We've been waiting for it for a long time. I hope it doesn't get stuck in endless bureaucracy and waivers, and the proof is always in the pudding, but we're very excited about it.
But for many Palestinians, the move disqualifies Washington as an honest broker. The noise now not about peace, but resistance. In Gaza, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamist group, called for another uprising. In Arabic, intifada, a word synonymous with more troubled times.
Tomorrow will be a day of rage and the beginning of a wider move towards an uprising, which we will call the Intifada of Jerusalem and freedom in the West Bank.
Donald Trump said he was merely recognising a reality. Israel's Prime Minister now claiming others will follow suit.
I have no doubt that once the American embassy moves to Jerusalem, or even before, there will be a movement of many other countries' embassies to Jerusalem. The time has come.
But the international reaction so far suggests otherwise. In Istanbul, anger directed at Washington outside the US consulate last night.
Mr. President, I'm going to hand
And America's allies like France also disagree. President Macron today at an airbase in Qatar. A peace deal between the Palestinians and Israelis, he says, only possible if Jerusalem has an international status.
The status of Jerusalem is a question of international security, which concerns the entire international community.
So as tensions rise, France and Britain, their opposition directly to the Americans at a special UN Security Council meeting tomorrow. The fear that a decades-old conflict could lead to widespread violence once again. Tom Burridge, BBC News.
Well, our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins now. So, James, just taking up on what Tom Burridge was saying there, this violence we've seen is what was feared by many.
It was predicted widely, and actually predicted, I think, by President Trump's State Department, who, after all, issued instructions to the United States' own diplomats to avoid all but essential travel to the region. I think what's really remarkable, and it emerged in Tom's report, of course, is the scale of international unity against the position taken up by President Trump. It's actually put on the same side of the argument, although advocating completely different tactics, Hamas, the Islamist organisation, and the governments of the major Western powers, including Britain and France, who are actively calling Britain and France and their European allies for a discussion of the United States decisions in the Security Council. It's very unusual for the Europeans to be seen orchestrating a meeting in the UN, which is bound to be highly critical of Washington. I think it is a remarkable moment, but the hope is that such protest as there is may be largely peaceful, not exclusively peaceful, and the pressure now on President Trump, including from Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, is to back up his decision with definite American try to advance the peace process. Boris Johnson echoing what many others have said, you've taken this provocative decision, unhelpful, Britain calls it, now you have to follow it up with ideas about how you really are going to advance the peace process.
OK, James, thank you. The number of patients waiting for over 4 hours to be seen in accident and emergency units across the UK has more than doubled in the past 4 years, according to research done by the BBC. Northern Ireland has the worst performance. England has seen the fastest deterioration. The government says more money is being made available in England to help hospitals cope this winter, as our health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports.
Right across the UK, accident and emergency departments have been working at full capacity. Now, BBC analysis shows how an already busy system is struggling to cope. The waiting time target to treat or deal with 95% of patients within 4 hours has been missed across the country. In the past year, more than 3 million patients waited longer than 4 hours, an increase of 120% on 4 years ago. But visits to A&E are up by only 7% to nearly 27 million. To ensure the target is met, the NHS would need to build an additional 20 A&E departments.
There is no more capacity in the system. Our staff are working really hard, our nurses, our doctors, and we've reached a point where we unfortunately cannot meet that demand.
It's clear that over the past 4 years, more and more people have been attending accident and emergency departments. But it's the complexity of many of those cases that has contributed to longer and longer waits for patients. And the picture right across the UK is extremely mixed. Scotland has come closest to hitting the target, while England has seen the biggest increase in those facing a long wait. But performance is even worse in Wales, and Northern Ireland manages to see just 3/4 of patients within 4 hours. The Luton and Dunstable Hospital is one of the best performing in the UK, but that's taken an intense effort.
We can only meet the 4-hour target if we can move patients out of the emergency department, and to be able to do need to have beds available within the hospital to move those patients from the emergency department, and that's where everybody working within the hospital system has a role to play.
Across the UK, there are efforts to control the numbers arriving at A&E while also moving patients through hospitals more quickly to free up beds. But the coming winter months will be a challenge.
We know the NHS is under more pressure because we've got more people coming in. We also know the money is tight. We also know that there are workforce shortages. But what I can assure everybody is that both trusts and the national NHS have prepared better for this winter than they've ever prepared before. But we'll have to see what happens.
A busier NHS means longer waiting times, and so far, the sign of respite for staff or patients. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
Well, with me now is our health editor, Hugh Pym. Hugh, are the pressures on A&E even more intense this winter than last?
Well, Rita, it does seem like that. We've had some new figures today from NHS England saying that bed occupancy in hospitals in the most recent week was 94.5%, above where it was a year ago. And the issue of bed availability is key to all this, as we've been hearing, because if beds can't be freed up for new patients coming in, then you get a backlog going back into A&E and these long waits there. And discharging patients is often a problem as we've heard so many times, because of social care issues. If an elderly patient who's medically fit can't be found somewhere to go because something hasn't been set up at home, then that causes real problems. Yes, more money has been invested in social care by the government in England, and yes, the government's made more money available in the budget for the NHS to deal with winter pressures, though there's a feeling that came too little too late. And looking back over the last few years with this BBC research we've got, it shows the relentless rise in patient numbers coming through the door, but even more of them waiting longer than 4 hours. It's gone a bit in Scotland, but it's gone up rapidly in England.
And how much is this rise in numbers down to people going to A&E when they don't really need to?
I think there is certainly an element of that, and the way that hospitals deal with it, the best hospitals, including Luton and Dunstable, is to have senior doctors near the front door of the hospital and have GPs near the front door of the hospital, so you can take people out of the equation and send them back into the community because they don't necessarily need to be there. But certainly there are people there who feel they're not getting what they need from their local GP, they're not getting the sort of cover they want outside a hospital, so they want to be in there. So I think the NHS in England certainly feels there's a big education role here for people, that going to see a pharmacist and not coming into A&E or going to the GP is much the best way of taking pressure off at this difficult time in winter.
OK, thank you. And if you want to find out what waiting times are like at your hospital service, go to the BBC's NHS Tracker page on the website. You just need to put in your postcode. The investigation into the Croydon tram crash 13 months ago has found that the driver probably dozed off before the accident. The tram went round a tight bend 3 times faster than the speed limit, killing 7 passengers and injuring more than 60. Investigators made a number of recommendations, including introducing automatic braking systems and putting in tougher windows and doors. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reports.
Going far too fast around a tight bend that killed 7 people and injured more than 60. Now, the official report suggests the driver may have temporarily nodded off. Well, you can see just how tight this bend is. The tram was meant to be going around it at 13 miles an hour, 1-3, a snail's pace, like we are now. It actually went around the bend at nearer 45 miles an hour. And one of the survivors was standing exactly where I'm standing now, just checking his phone.
The injury I sustained on the tram that day just changed my life.
It's more than a year ago, but for Tayi, the memories are fresh.
I just put my phone away and I held on to the pole right in front of me and I said, please, God, save my life. I closed my eyes. And there were some people still screaming under the tram there because they were trapped. Please don't step on me, I'm still alive.
He thinks passengers tried to warn the driver.
Normally when they approach that corner curve, it normally slowed down. But that day, everybody knew. Everybody was screaming, shouting, some people are banging the door. So we don't get any correspondence from the driver.
Investigators found other worrying facts. Another tram nearly derailed on the same corner just 9 days before, but it wasn't investigated properly. In fact, 9 drivers admitted they'd used emergency or heavy braking on the same bend, but they were worried about reporting near misses. It also talks of inadequate speed signs. Half of the passengers were thrown out of the tram through smashed windows and doors. It was the main cause of injuries and deaths. Investigators say trams should have tougher glass and doorways in future.
Bye-bye.
Logan lost her husband Philip in the accident. She's furious the tram operator didn't act on previous speeding events.
Very, very angry. Because these procedures should be there to protect the public. And that is not protecting the public.
The driver is still being investigated on suspicion of manslaughter. Since the accident, new speed signs have gone up and there's a new system that vibrates the seat if the driver closes their eyes for more than a second or so. Survivors are living with this accident every day.
I don't know what to say. It just changed my life completely.
Richard Westcott, BBC News, Croydon.
Downing Street says the government is close to an agreement on the status of the Irish border after Brexit, although there is more work to be done. The EU says a proposal from the UK is needed by Sunday at the latest in advance of a summit next week. Well, let's speak to our political correspondent Chris Mason at Westminster. So, Chris, the clock is clearly ticking. The government's under a lot of pressure to come up with a solution that will satisfy all sides.
Yeah, to describe this as rather tricky would be the mild understatement of the morning. And as things stand, there is no breakthrough. So the European Commission said this morning that there was no white smoke yet, in their words. Downing Street, as you were just saying, saying that they are close, but there is still more work to be done. We now know of a new deadline, a redefinition, if you like, of when the end of this week is. The European Commission saying that as far as they're concerned, there is until the end of Sunday for the UK to come forward with a new plan. Why is that? Well, on Monday morning, civil servants known as Sherpas gather. They are called Sherpas because they are meant to guide the way. The summit, that European summit starting a week today, that will decide whether or not sufficient progress has been made to allow the UK to move on to the next stage of the Brexit negotiations to talk about the future relationship. Meanwhile, back here, criticism from 19 Remain supporting Conservative MPs in the direction of their Brexit supporting colleagues, saying that they have acted irresponsibly in restricting the Prime Minister, making it harder for her to negotiate. A reminder really of the multidimensional, multinational, mighty complicated nature of these negotiations. Whichever shoulder the Prime Minister looks over, there are critics and difficult compromises to consider.
Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there. Time is just after 1:15. Our top story this lunchtime. Tear gas and water cannons are used as violence breaks out in the Palestinian West Bank following President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And coming up, 'tis the season to be jolly, and this group of actors is gearing up for the great Muslim panto.
And in South today, close encounters. But what's the plan to stop so many lorries getting stuck in this Dorset village? And saved for posterity, Reading's famous mural celebrating black culture wins protected status.
Now, this is the largest and most expensive warship ever built for the Royal Navy. The Queen commissioned HMS Queen Elizabeth at a ceremony in Portsmouth, attended by 4,000 people. The ship, which won't take part in military operations until 2021, cost more than £3 billion and has become the flagship of the fleet. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has been watching it all.
Well, despite the weather, this is a bright day for the Royal Navy. This ship will be in service for the next 50 years. As you say, the largest, most expensive warship now being commissioned by Her Majesty the Queen into service, and the white ensign raised for the very first time. A day of pride for the Royal Navy and a chance to look to the future. And for now, forget about recent defence cuts and fears of even more. This the day the largest ever warship is commissioned into service.
We've been on a long, complicated but committed journey to get to this point, and commissioning of the ship is a key milestone in that journey.
It's been one of the biggest engineering projects ever undertaken, a national endeavour involving more than 10,000 people across the UK. Helping build this, the first of two massive new carriers, all assembled in Rosyth. Over the past few months, HMS Queen Elizabeth and her 700-strong crew have been testing her at sea. Russia's already described her as a large, convenient target. But the government says she'll be a potent weapon and symbol of British military power. 2 years ago, the Queen named her. Today, she made her first visit on board, in front of nearly 4,000 guests in the ship's cavernous hangar that will eventually hold the carrier's aircraft.
May God's blessing be upon the ship and the personnel hereby entrusted to your command, and may your joint endeavours to uphold the high traditions of the Royal Navy in the service of Her Majesty the Queen be crowned with success and happiness.
And then the raising of the white ensign for the very first time, meaning she's now legally recognised as a warship of the Royal Navy. the nation's future flagship, saluted with a flypast.
A true flagship for the 21st century. The most powerful and capable ship ever to raise the white ensign, she will, in the years and decades ahead, represent this country's resolve on the global stage.
She will be a giant of the sea, but at a price of more than £3 billion. The jets that'll fly off her will cost billions more. And despite this at a time when there's talk of further defence cuts. Well, this is another milestone, not the end of the journey. Next year, Queen Elizabeth will be conducting flight trials, first with helicopters and then with those new F-35 jets, each costing about £100 million. And then she will go on her first military deployment in 2021.
Jonathan, thank you. Bath Spa University has defended its decision to give its departing Vice-Chancellor £808,000 in pay and benefits. It comes a week after the Vice-Chancellor at Bath University announced she was resigning following controversy over her pay. Adina Campbell reports.
Known for its popular teacher training courses, Bath Spa University prides itself as one of the UK's leading creative institutions. It's also one of the country's smallest universities. But it's now been revealed payments to its departing Vice-Chancellor, Professor Christina Slade, are thought to be the highest in the university sector, reigniting anger about excessive Vice-Chancellor pay.
£800,000 for a former Vice-Chancellor is an outrageous sum, and for Bath Spa University to be paying this sum shows that they're accountable to one, in effect. What we now need is an independent inquiry into Vice-Chancellor's pay, and until done, I think a cap should be imposed by the government of no more than £200,000 for any Vice-Chancellor a year.
Bath Spa University said it paid Professor Slade a sum which reflected her contractual and statutory entitlements and was considered to represent value for money. On top of her £250,000 salary, Professor Slade was also paid £429,000 for loss of salary, £89,000 of pension contributions, plus a housing allowance and other benefits amounting to £40,000, a total of £808,000.
You're talking an enormous amount of money here, and you're talking about this set against students who are having very high levels of debt, staff who are finding that their pensions are being attacked, knowing that they have a system that is under real pressure.
This isn't the first time Bath has hit the headlines over Vice-Chancellor pay. Last week, Professor Dame Glynis Breakwell, Britain's highest paid Vice-Chancellor, announced she was resigning from Bath University in a row over her £468,000 salary. The government has told universities from next year they have to justify paying their staff more than £150,000 in what campaigners say is a bloated and out-of-date big bucks system. Adina Campbell, BBC News.
A senior counter-terrorism officer has pleaded guilty to failing to safeguard information under the Official Secrets Act. Assistant Chief Constable Marcus Beale from West Midlands Police admitted leaving the confidential documents in a car for 4 or 5 days before they were stolen in May. An investigation has been launched into whether the Labour group Momentum, which supports Jeremy Corbyn, broke spending rules during the general election. The Electoral Commission is considering if the grassroots campaigning organisation spent more money than is legally allowed and if it accurately recorded donations. There's been yet another outbreak of wildfire in Southern California, hitting the state's highway and reaching the Pacific Ocean. The homes of more than 150,000 people have been evacuated in an area north of Los Angeles, and hundreds of buildings have been damaged. James Cook has sent this report.
No one can escape from nature, not even in Bel Air, one of the wealthiest suburbs on Earth. All day there's been a battle to save homes here, and the owners have been rushing to grab what they can as they flee from their mansions.
We built this house 13 years ago.
Never seen anything like it.
Do you think the firefighters are going to save it?
They're my heroes. It's in God's and the firefighters' hands.
And those heroes are being helped by much lighter winds for now.
So with the potential winds, okay, and the fires developing, those embers can fly a distance away, spot firing canyons below us.
And you're worried that that might be what happens because the winds are forecast to get up?
That's correct.
The media mogul Rupert Murdoch's vineyard property is one of those which is smouldering, but helicopters have been making good use of the lull in the weather. How's it looking? Good. Well, these firefighters are now battling a blaze in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Los Angeles. We're surrounded by expensive homes, and this fire is likely to get worse this afternoon when the winds pick up. It was in the beachside city of Ventura where the first wildfire exploded with terrifying speed. Driven by ferocious desert winds whipping down the dusty canyons. And last night it jumped the main coastal motorway, causing terror for drivers.
To the left is Bel Air. To the right is that Brentwood? Is Brentwood.
Whoa, I can feel the heat.
It has barely rained here in LA for 6 months, and you can tell. Many scientists say climate change is driving more frequent, more destructive wildfires. For California, this is yet another grim wake-up call. James Cook, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Australia's parliament has voted overwhelmingly to legalise same-sex marriages after months of intense nationwide debate. There was cheering, clapping and hugging as Parliament's lower house approved the measure. A national poll showed a majority of Australians were in favour of same-sex unions. Chart-topping singer-songwriter Ed Sheeran has been awarded an MBE by the Prince of Wales for his musical achievements and his charity work. The award-winning celebrity, whose latest album Divided spent more than 15 weeks at the top of the charts, received the honour at Buckingham Palace. Now, World Heritage status conferred by UNESCO is usually awarded to buildings or to sites of special importance. But now the art of Neapolitan pizza making has been honoured. Pizza makers in Naples say they'll celebrate by giving out free pizza, as James Reynolds has been finding out.
You might not think that pizza here in Naples needs UNESCO protection. There are plenty of people queuing up, but it's now part of the world's intangible heritage. And if I can get past here, I want to show you how it's done. Eugenio is the pizza maker, and UNESCO's decided that what he's doing here, have a look at how he's kneading the dough, what he's doing here is unique to Naples. It may be copied across the world, but it started here first. Sei felice, no?
Molto felice.
He's very happy. Obviously a leading question. And then just have a look here at what happens to the world's intangible heritage. It goes into the oven for just about 2 minutes, and it may be intangible, but in the end, you can eat it.
James Reynolds in Naples there, hoping to sample some World Heritage pizza. Now, Panto season is upon us, and a group of actors from East London has been putting the finishing touches to a performance of The Great Muslim Panto. It's thought to be Britain's first ever Muslim pantomime and will be touring 6 cities to raise money for the charity Orphan Kind. BBC Asian Network's Shabnam Mahmood has more.
I'm Ego!
Final rehearsals for the Great Muslim Panto, billed as the first of its kind. It's not much different from your average production, but this one has been made with Muslims in mind and includes a regular from the BBC hit comedy Citizen Khan.
It's a Muslim cast, a full Muslim cast for the first time, and the storylines are a little bit different as well. A bit of the good teaching of Islam implemented in it as well. We get a lot of stick, from certain people who say that we don't integrate enough. Well, you can't get more integrated than a Muslim panto, can you?
Although it follows the real-life story of an orphan girl, the production keeps in line with traditional Christmas pantos. Plenty of songs, costume changes and comedy. It's been created and performed by a Muslim family cast of 7, which includes the baby.
It's got all the traditional slapstick, it's got the he's behind you, it's got all of that in it, but it's just got a bit of our history too.
It's actually an opportunity
for people like Muslim women to actually say, you know what, I'm wearing a hijab, but I can still go on stage and I can still act and I can still do my dream. So we're just basically giving a platform for them.
The performance is not just restricted to a Muslim audience, but organisers are hoping for more people from the Islamic faith to come to the show, proving that pantomime is for everyone.
I told you to poison the red apple!
The Great Muslim Panto will tour 6 cities across the country and is expected to raise thousands of pounds for charity. Shabnam Mahmood, BBC News.
Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Louise Lear. And Louise, has Storm Caroline finally arrived?
She has, and she's really influencing the weather story, actually, Rita. Not perhaps as you would think, because yes, we've got storm-force winds across the far northeast of Scotland and still an amber weather warning in force. But once this frontal system tied into Caroline clears away, it's going to open the floodgates for bitterly cold Arctic air to push right across the country. It's going to feel pretty miserable out there for the next couple of days, a real wintry flavour to our weather. But more on that in just a moment. For the here and now, we've still got some rain across the far southeast to clear away. Behind it, actually, some brightness, some sunshine coming through before a real cluster of showers develop. Some of them heavy, thundery, with some hail and eventually some snow as we go through the latter stages of the day. So it's going to be a pretty miserable end to the day across Scotland. Blizzard-like conditions here, some snow and feeling bitterly cold as well. We've actually seen the warmest of the weather, believe it or not, this morning across England and Wales, 8 or 9 degrees, but the cold air starting to filter down from the north, and that is going to continue to just exacerbate those showers through the night, falling as snow across Scotland into Northern Ireland, stretching down through the Cheshire Gap towards Wales. A cold start to Friday. Temperatures hovering either side of freezing. So if you're out on the roads early on with some snow showers as well, lying snow possibility and some ice on the roads, it's certainly worth tuning into your BBC local radio stations for travel and traffic updates, because at 8 o'clock in the morning, just look how widespread these showers are, blown in by some gale force gusts of winds. A miserable start across much of Scotland. Similar story into Northern Ireland as well, running down through the Isle of Man, through the Cheshire Gap, down towards the North Midlands and Wales. That's where we're likely to see the most frequent showers through the early morning. It's going to be a cold start elsewhere, but it will be a drier one with some glimpses of sunshine, believe it or not, for some, particularly eastern England as we go through the day. Now, that northwesterly wind always driving in the showers, chiefly to the north and west facing coast, but some of those will continue to filter further inland. So we could see some accumulations by the end of the afternoon, 5 to 10 centimetres across England and Wales, 10 to 20 centimetres in Scotland. And just to add insult to injury, factor in the strength of the wind, it is going to feel raw out there. You'll certainly need to wrap up warm. Now, as we move out of Friday into Saturday, a cold and frosty start. Still a few showers, but not as frequent. And in fact, on Saturday, a quieter day with some sunshine, but bitterly cold. Then Sunday, you'll need to keep abreast of the forecast if you've got outdoor plans, because this weather system, as it comes in, is going to bump into the cold air, and on the leading edge there's going to be some snow, but there's a great deal of uncertainty just where that is going to be sitting. Keep abreast of the forecast. Rita.
Thank you, Louise. A reminder now of our main story this lunchtime. Tear gas and water cannons are used as violence breaks out in the Palestinian West Bank, following President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Well, that is all from BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.